All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Watts, and I'm a coordinator with our student organization and leadership team based out of Tempe. And today we've got another session of our summer workshop series, today covering risk mitigation and management. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to pop them into the chat, pop into the Q&A, and we will go from there. All right. So then diving on into it, today we're going to cover a few different things. We're going to start by addressing what exactly constitutes a risk. We're going to cover why this should matter to you. We're also going to dive into what you can do, and then finally wrap up with next steps. So diving right on into it. First of all, what exactly is risk? When we're talking about risk, it's a phrase and a term that comes up a lot: risk management, risk, et cetera, et cetera. The important things to know is that risk is generally a situation involving exposure to danger, someone or something that creates or suggests a hazard, and it's always present. But we do need to dive a little bit deeper into that because risk comes from a number of different areas. First of all, risk can come from a financial place. If you, as an organization, are expecting funds and they're not there, or are assuming a certain income or certain X, Y, or Z related to the financial side of things, and you're not able to cover it, that is a certain amount of risk. Prices change if you create a budget and things end up being more expensive than you expect. There's risk can come in a number of different ways here. Now, risk is also physical. This is kind of the most common thing people think of. What is the physical risk at play? What is the danger to a physical body in this event, situation, moment, etc.? You can also see mental or possibly emotional risk come from a situation. Marketing and legal. This is where you talk about reputation, but really the legal side of things is contracts, contracts, contracts. This is a situation where you need to understand about protecting yourself and protecting others. And conveniently, ASU actually does have a risk management office that can help you dive into a number of these things. There can be a lack of trust. This really dives into the risk of reputation. What is the reputational risk that arises from a situation? Things can blow up pretty fast through our social media platforms today, and as they refer to it, the 24-hour news cycle means that reputation is something that has to oftentimes be carefully curated. There's operational risk. This is something that can tie into a number of the areas that we'll talk about, but a lot of times these are things you may not think of. Operational risk can be tied to insurance, drones. There are actually some very specific policies and forms at ASU that you have to complete in order to fly a drone before it even takes off. Volunteers, if you're bringing in anybody who is doing something outside of their normal scope, there are things you need to do to coordinate and work with volunteers. Strategic risk can tie into kind of planning and procedures and how all of that fits. And then there's compliance around risk. This is another big one, and it's most commonly associated with rules and regulations. The important thing was that risk arises often from unexpected places. When it causes its biggest issues is when there is a lack of planning, because a lot of people most often view risk in the scope of risk versus reward. And that's one of the things we want to take in mind today as we consider what exactly is risk and why this should matter to you. First of all, no one generally worries about a risk until it becomes a problem. I cannot tell you how many times I've had someone say to me, well, we didn't think anyone would do X, Y, or Z. And That's the thing they do, which causes the problems. And these problems can range from small to potentially massive. It could be a fine, a severe talking to, massive legal battles. Oftentimes, these things can depend on who is involved and how severe the situation has ultimately become. From an organizational perspective, this can potentially affect standing if there are major enough issues. The other thing to know is that these consequences can be long lasting. These can be tied to an organization, which may now have detrimental effects on on your reputation, which can have an impact on future events, ability to make reservations or partnerships. Maybe your name is tied with it, which can lead to even greater issues. There are a number of these things that come up. So the question now becomes, what exactly can you do? Well, there's a few good starting points. First of all, and this may sound perhaps a little extreme, but it's a good starting point. Consider the worst case scenario. For example, maybe you get bouncy balls as a promotional item as a fun way to connect, but they can turn into trouble. Paper streamers look lovely, but they can affect points of egress in the event of a fire. Not being aware of proper food preparation can turn a relaxing dinner into an instantaneous nightmare. Having a presentation on a topic can lead to an unwanted or potentially unexpected attention. These are things you need to keep in mind as you consider these worst case scenarios. From there, review things from every angle. What are the possible pinch points or areas that are of concern, starting from the moment you contact someone about an event and possibly end up signing a contract, all the way through the moment that if this is an event specific thing, the people leave the event. I remember one time participating in an event where we were busing people to locations, and one of the bus drivers ended up running over a flower bed. At the moment, certainly very frustrating. You would assume it would be a quick and simple fix, pay for the flower bed, that sort of a thing. This in turn led to a tire on the bus blowing out on the way back, which is another layer of risk that comes in. And then the bus company created their own issues when asked to participate in dealing and covering this situation. So there are a number of things in risk that you need to keep in mind when you review things from every angle. That singular moment can cause additional things you want to keep and be aware of. Additionally, consider who needs to be involved in each phase. Are there people you need to clear certain activities or elements with? For that matter, are there partners who may have done this before that can give you some insight into what not to do or what to be aware of? From there, consider, are there ways to eliminate risk? Knowing, for example, that your audience at a meal, knowing the audience can help you ensure that hazards are taken into effect in meal preparation. But the truth is, eliminating risk is very difficult, if not at times impossible. So the question becomes, if you cannot eliminate it, how do you mitigate risk? Coming back to my earlier example, we talked about the bouncy balls, making sure they're wrapped and you hand them out at the end of an event really makes it difficult for those to become something that can be a danger during the event. The risk management office at ASU will tell you that they are not in the business of approving risks. They are there to help you understand and mitigate those risks. Keep a handle on it. So the question is, when all else fails, what are the next steps? Well, there's a few different elements here. We talked earlier about a lot of folks viewing risk as risk versus reward. When you consider risk management, what you really want to take into effect is the balance of the likelihood of the risk versus the impact of the risk. How likely is this risk to occur? How likely is this worst case scenario to occur? And if it does, what are the dangers? What is the outcome? What happens next? These are the things you want to look at. This doesn't mean you ignore the risk. You need to be aware of it. You need to accept that it's there. and understand what your process and procedures are going to be should that happen. Hoping that it doesn't, but should it happen, what can you do? Additionally, you want to know who to contact in various situations. If this is something that your organization has managed before, maybe you know to have particular people on file. Coming back to our example of contracts, do you have someone through the university or outside of the university who can help you mitigate and manage that? When it comes to funding, are you familiar with people who can help you balance a budget and understand that? When it comes to the physical aspects of risk, the most common steps would include things like having someone responsible for calling 911, or if the event's large enough, maybe you have EMS on call or officers on call or whoever else it may be. And finally, after these situations occur, you want to have a review process in place. Ideally, this is when minor things happen so you can eliminate major things happen, or when nothing has happened at all and you want to review where people felt the most concerned. This gives you a chance to understand the process and enhance what happens in the future to make it successful when you perform the event or activity, whatever it may be, again.